Welcome to On the Line. I'm Christine Williams. Coming up on our Viewpoints panel, how has September 11th changed the world? And later on, we'll be looking at success in the workplace. Stay tuned. And here are the issues to be presented today to our Viewpoints panel. A week of focus on September 11th. How did this fateful day change the world? The federal conservatives have decided to kill the $1.5 million pledge on Kyoto. What message does this send, if any at all? Pope Benedict gives a statement about our country, that we are turning our backs on God. Now later on, we'll be giving you tips on how to succeed in the workplace. But first, let's meet our Viewpoints panel. Neals Chitan is president of Motivate for Change International, and Robert Metz is the co-founder of the Freedom Party of Ontario. He's also president. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Good to be here, Christian.
Now, September 11th, a day nobody forgets, Monday, 5 years after the fact, and a huge article came out. In fact, this wasn't simply one page long, this was more than one page full. The day that changed the world, and it continues here inside. Now, on this picture, you can see a picture of President Bush here. He's actually in that picture being told at that moment what had happened when those towers went down, for the first time being told in this particular picture. Now, I don't think we could deny that it has, of course, changed the world. I'm going to actually start with you, Neals, and I'm going to ask you, first of all, what you thought of this article, and even what you think, perhaps, on how it changed the world.
Well, it was, by the way, it was quite a... The author of the article was very flowery in painting the picture. Did a very good job in painting the picture the way he saw it. However, there is no doubt that 9/11 has changed the world. It has affected us at every level of society. Planes plunging into the financial empire of the American society, Twin Tower. People dying. We heard it was like 5,000-6,000, and then it came down to 2,000 people. That's a lot of lives to be lost.
And then it ended up just under 3,000.
Yes, a lot of lives, a lot of grief. We saw the pictures, the vivid pictures of firemen dying and everything. It has made quite a profound impression on the minds of those who saw it, and I have no doubt that it's going to be living on. The memories will be living on. People will be passing it on to their children. However, there are some things that have changed for good. The word zero tolerance has appeared in our vocabulary. People's level of toleration has dropped at every facet of societal life. We can't even mention the flying industry, and it's just compounded and compounded and compounded. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, you had the England situation with the so-called alleged 10, 12 planes to be taken down. So it has created quite a lot of trauma in the minds of people. Eyebrows are sticking up because they just don't know when. I mean, once they were terrorists, look at what happened in Toronto just a couple weeks ago with the so-called 20, I think it was 18, 20 young men.
17 altogether.
17 young men. I mean, just panic strikes us. So it has been it has changed our lives.
Hasn't been an easy walk, that's for sure. Robert, how has it changed in your opinion? If you want to comment first about the article, of course, do so.
No, I think I'll get right to the point. I don't know that it's changed us that much, then revealed things about us that we maybe did not know before. It's really interesting because on 9/10, the day before 9/11, I was actually researching and working on an article about how anti-American so many people have become just here in Canada and also abroad. And since then, I've learned, boy, it's stronger than I thought. There's a greater degree of anti-Semitism. There's a tremendous belief in a moral equivalence between rogue nations and terrorists and the democracies, and that I never knew existed among the people in my own society. I thought most people had a deeper understanding of right and wrong, And I think the other thing that really changed on 9/11 was the acknowledgement. I mean, it wasn't the first time that towers were attempted to be bombed. That could have happened in '93.
Exactly.
And had they come down then, would we have then changed since '93? I think it was the success of the act that made us wake up and realize that the threat is real, that there are people out there who feel such great hatred towards our society that they're willing to kill themselves.
I find it very
to
interesting
make a
what you're
statement,
saying,
you
that
know?
this was an issue before, because on our last program, I actually read a quote that was by Bill Clinton, and it sounded exactly like George Bush talking, because he was referring to the threat of terrorism. Osama bin Laden was a name that got plummeted into the limelight when those towers went down. And as you said, though, that name was actually around in a very threatening way, and it was very known to the Clinton administration at the time. This battle with terror had actually started before September 11th, and people of that time were thinking, in government I'm saying here, it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when, and it happened in such a brutal way that it woke everybody up.
That's interesting you say that, because I was reading, on that day I was doing the research, I was reading the newsletter from the Mackenzie Institute. I don't know if you're aware of their work. And
John Thompson, we've had him many times.
I know John very well, and I know in that issue I was reading, he was saying it's a huge terrorist act is going to happen imminently, right? It was right there. I'm reading it the day before, and the next day it happened. So for me, it affected me, you know, very personally, because I was already involved in the issue, and it certainly set off a lot of passions. And
one of the things I want to raise is that in the article, the economist was kind of alluding to the fact that it may have been kind of orchestrated. And when I read it, I didn't know how to react to that, because I didn't follow the political before that. But and they were even trying to tie the president of the United States to it in the article, of course.
Well, it was clearly orchestrated, but I don't think by the president.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
He knew about it, and of course, if you read the article with the AUMF thing, where he went to Congress to get kind of a unilateral presidential or White House consent, basically because a war on terrorism was announced, and we are going to take care of that. Wherever we have to go, we're going to take care of that. And he went and he got this kind of unilateral White House okay to just declare war on terrorism wherever we got to go, right? So as I read the article, I said, wow, you know, I don't have an opinion on that really, because I don't know what the situation was. But the author did a pretty good job in trying to come up with a case of where the government seemed to have, it was a concussion kind of a thing of the whole event.
Now, it's very interesting that you would say so, because there are those conspiracy theories going on, but there's also division in those theories, because some would say it's America that began that or had to do with it, but they wouldn't say which president, because right now Bush is the one at the forefront of the battle against terror. But at the same time, I mean, if people were really following the news back then, they would be aware that at that time Osama bin Laden was a major issue, and they'd be aware that the Taliban government and the Northern Alliance were engaged in a horrible fight, and America was right onto that. And a lot had begun before September 11th, so you know, it just goes on and on.
I think a lot of the conspiracy theories come out of the false expectation that government can save you from anything, including terrorism, which is just not the case. We can be safer, we can, you know, have tighter security, more surveillance. None of those things will help against terrorists who are used to closed economies, who are used to going through border checks that we wouldn't even think of, you know. So for them, it's easy to get through. The person who suffers the most with the increased controls are the average citizen, you know. But it's a price that a lot of them say they're willing to pay for the extra security. Is that what they're actually getting? I don't think, I mean, it's great when we hear of a foiled attempt, you know, that's great. It sounds like some kind of progress made. Would we have heard of any of these things had there not been a 9/11?
Robert, I want to hear what you'll have to say about this particular question. Do you think it has heightened an awareness of North American culture? Because long before September 11th, the Middle East, for example, and what's going on in Afghanistan, wars are not, by no means, are wars strange to them. This is something they've lived and breathed for a very long time. But in our culture, we're used to just getting up every day, minding our own business, and our world is basically our own family and social networks. But now, we're faced with a whole new world where it goes beyond our very own existence, and we start to take on more of a global perspective. Do you see this?
Well, absolutely.
An awakening, if you will.
Absolutely. There's a certain, that's the great thing about it, is the increase in awareness. I think largely, though, again, most North Americans were not aware of the threat against them, or that didn't take it seriously because, oh, no, you guys can't possibly pull that off.
It wasn't primetime news, put it that way.
No. And terrorists, by being terrorists, are actually acknowledging their weakness. They cannot beat a country that's as mighty as the U.S., so they have to use terrorist tactics, which means subterfuge. It means hiding among civilians. It means all sorts of things that would never be considered in any sort of war convention. I mean, we even play wars by rules, which is a little ridiculous when you think about it, but still, it still shows some level of civilization on each side of that debate, you know. And I think that's what we've seen stripped away from the way that this is being done. That any veneer of civilization just doesn't exist on the part of terrorists. They have no respect for life, not even their own. And that's hard to contend with.
But a lot of people in our culture don't understand or even identify with this. They're still, because Jack Layton recently said, go out and negotiate with the Taliban. I mean, how do you negotiate with the Taliban?
Yeah, what do you negotiate? You know, there are no terms. There were no terms offered on 9/11. Hey, listen, if you do this or we won't do this. That wasn't the point. 9/11 was the objective. That was it.
That was it. No,
and so to negotiate is totally outrageous. It just it disturbs me to hear that it's so popular with so many people.
Now we're going to have to go for a break now. We'll be talking about our second subject matter, which, again, a controversy, the Kyoto Accord. Now the Conservatives have opted out of $1.5 million pledge. We're going to talk about it after this. Stay tuned. Hello again and welcome back to our Viewpoints panel. The issue up for discussion now, the federal Conservatives have decided to kill the $1.5 million pledge on Kyoto. Now, the implications of this have been examined because some are saying that they've gone back on a pledge that they should not have and that it signifies that the Conservatives are lacking respect for the environment. But in my opinion, it goes much deeper than this. Now, I'm going to start with you this time, Neals. Did I start with you
No,
last
you
time
started
first?
with the
Okay,
first
now
time.
it's your turn.
Okay.
Robert, I'm going to start with you. Would you agree with this on the surface, that you would point fingers and say that this signifies there's a lack of concern about the Kyoto Accord
Cutting back
or the environment?
Cutting back $1.5 million grant to a foreign nation on top of that is almost a non-issue, let alone a concern. You know, I think Kyoto, it's funny, Kyoto is about temperature, not about pollution, which is totally different in terms of how
Interesting
most
that you would say that,
environmentalists
because
think.
a lot of people disagree with that. Interesting that you would say
But
this.
it's about CO2 and carbon dioxide. That's the stuff we're breathing out right now as we're sitting here. So
That's
we
right.
are, in effect, violating the Kyoto Accord by living. And the oceans provide most of the CO2 in the country. Also, Kyoto, you have to realize, was a consensus among politicians, not among scientists. Scientists are strongly opposed to it. 17,000 scientists signed, what is it called, the Oregon petition against Kyoto. So 17,000, not just 1, 2, 5, or 10, but 17,000, to give you an idea that there is no scientific consensus. Also, I've learned a lot about weather itself and weather and climate. Extremely complex and ridiculous to assume that you can affect it by having wealth transfers from one country to another, because that's really what Kyoto is about. I mean, Kyoto equals foreign aid equals transfer of funds from
Well, I want to
one
ask you for a
country to
moment here
another.
about the logistics of it. This whole clean development mechanism, which works on an emissions trading program, does that make sense to you?
No.
As to being a viable solution?
You're
Because
actually
when you look at
selling
it,
pollution
you're actually
rights
selling,
there.
exactly. And to me, from what I've studied, that's what it amounts to. You have a country, for instance, like Canada, who may not be up to the mark or over the limit when it comes to their pollution's emissions. So all they do is buy those credits and give the money to some other country who might need it. What they're doing with the money, I suppose, is their choice. But I can't see how that really makes for a better environment in terms of pollution.
No, and there's no way to predict what they can do either. I mean, CO2, I don't know if you've seen how some people grow plants love CO2. I mean,
That's what it's driving.
you're going to find, and we do find even today that formerly arid areas aren't arid anymore. There's actually plants and wildlife there. Now, what do? They create oxygen in turn, and the whole cycle begins again. And I don't think it's something you can predict. Chaotic models alone, you know, scientific chaos, show that not everything is as linearly predictable as they say in Kyoto. It's a very complex issue, and politicians aren't even close to trying to solve it.
Neals, I'm going to ask you a bit of a tough one here. In terms of the politics of the timing, do you think it was wise, or do you think it should even be questioned on that level?
You know what? I did a little research on the Kyoto situation there, and of course, the $1.5 million
Yes, it was
was
a pledge.
pledged by the former government. Yeah, it
That's
was.
true.
Correct.
That's true.
right. When the situation was brought forth in the House, the NDP accepted it, the Bloc accepted it, and the Conservative did not. And they have said in the article that, you know what, we've come into power and we've said we're not going to support this pledge. If you look at, I think it was Ryan Sparrow.
So you're saying they were straightforward right
They
from
were
the beginning?
straightforward right up front. Now, personally, I don't think $1.5 million is a whole lot of money.
No, it's not.
It's not a whole lot of
It's
money.
not.
I mean, Christine, during the summer I was downtown. They were planting flowers on the front on the lake shore, and somebody said it was $3 million to put flowers down for a couple of weeks and pick it up. So I thought, I mean, to hold back $1.5 million, if it's worth it at all. But again, as I read the article, they said, hey, that was our promise. We stood by it.
But again, I mean, that is the issue with the media as well, because when you look at a headline, it can be rather damaging for people who perhaps don't know the inside information. Tories kill pledge on Kyoto.
Makes it
That
sound like
sounds
the Kyoto
bad.
Accord.
That sounds really bad.
Yeah.
And then you have a quote here. This is deliberate sabotage of one of the fundamental Kyoto mechanisms. But I think, to be fair to the Conservatives as well, they've actually sent out quite recently, last week before, they sent out a study. Well, they're doing a study, in fact, to find out how much the environment really matters to Canadians. And they did pledge and promise that they're going to work on a made-in-Canada approach. Because according to the findings of this research, Canadians do care about pollution. But in terms of the Kyoto Accord and the viability of it, the logistics of it, that can create a problem in itself.
The history tells us that in 2001, U.S. just dumped it. They weren't part of it. And then it comes back and tells us in 2001 also, Russia was very, very, very leery. They didn't want to accept it, but accepted it afterwards. So it seemed that there was always some kind of a back and forth about it. If it's going to solve the problem, greenhouse gas,
See, I don't even think it's a problem. We know the Earth has been warming. I mean, the last ice age, believe it or not, was yesterday in geological terms, 10,000 years ago, right? And there was a mini ice age in the year 1313, which wiped out vineyards and things in England they were planning to grow back at that time, but then they had a mini ice age.
So you think it's a natural process?
They're certainly a great part of a natural process. I know some of the stuff I was reading was also pointing out that the average temperature on the moon has gone up 3 or 4 degrees centigrade, probably because of the sun activity, because that has a lot to do with it. And the oceans are the biggest effector for planet warming. If there's, say, a volcano or something going on under the Pacific Ocean in the South Pacific, we're going to feel it. It's going to affect our temperature.
Do any of you believe that there should be some kind of a global solution worked on, but perhaps better ironed out than the Kyoto, less ambiguous?
Well, you certainly shouldn't allow pollution just to run over on people's properties, but that's a whole other issue. Kyoto's not about pollution; it's about just warming and temperature. And
But there has been quite over the last 2 decades, quite a lot said in the print media and otherwise about depletion of the ozone layer, and of course the changing climate is attributed to that. If that is so, as good citizens of the Earth, not just Canada, we should all come up with a master plan to see how we could reduce that. Reduce anything that would deplete our ozone layer, because of course now it's attributed to different kinds of skin cancers, right? So we
exposure
should
to the sun.
Yes, exposure to the sun. Of course, the ozone layer is a blanket that keeps the ultraviolet rays away from us. And if that's depleted, then of course it could have hazardous health effects. So as a people, as a race, human race, we do owe it to our environment to come up with a comprehensive plan that would actually solve the problem.
And that's fair. We're going to go for a break now. When we come back, while Pope Benedict says our country is turning its back on God, we're going to talk about it after this. Stay tuned. Hello again and welcome back to our Viewpoints discussion. Our last item up for discussion is what Pope Benedict says. He says Canada is turning its back on God. Quite the statement. Now, 7 Ontario bishops were visiting Vatican City, and that is who he was addressing. Once again, quite the statement. I mean, we have a lot of Catholics globally, in Canada as well, and to hear him say that, well, we know the implications of that. Now, Neals, comments about this comment?
Well, you know, I have always, I'm an advocate of separation of state and religion. Okay, I don't think that religion should have be actually pushing its agenda.
It's not a pulpit.
No, it's not a pulpit.
The bottom line.
It's not a pulpit. Especially in the fact that Canada prides as the multicultural mecca of the world. Okay, we have all different kind of religions. I mean, a vast array of religions. We probably have over 200 countries represented here, and we cannot be going to one particular prejudicial to one particular theory or doctrine. So a lot of Christians, I'm a Christian by the way, and a lot of Christians have a problem with prayer in the school system and the Bible in the school system. I don't.
I'm going to ask you one thing though, because I will say this is something that this is a premise I believe for all human life, period, that everybody comes with a belief system.
That's correct.
Whether it be secular, whether it be Hindu, Muslim, in fact, according to what you were saying, so many different beliefs. And when people make decisions on a day-to-day basis, I mean, it's part of who they are. So from that argument, what you're saying, I mean, we've seen the work of secularists in the past, and I did use this example in the past of Stalin, of Hitler, and these were secularists. Now, I'm not saying for a moment that, I'm not comparing the two, saying that every secularist is of this likes, but what I am saying is that everybody comes wired with a belief system. I agree with you in that we cannot change. We cannot have a pulpit in Parliament. That's the bottom line, I agree. But from the point of view of a belief system, religion, it's a sticky situation because there's a belief system attached. Now, I know that this article talks about the whole gay marriage issue, because that's what brought it up, and abortion. Right. But there are certain issues that it's not just an issue of Christianity. There are a lot of other religions that also would agree. So why not put something like this, of such a strong feeling, to perhaps a referendum? Not calling it of any religious belief, because it draws such feeling, why not put it to a referendum?
It's quite different.
You know, I'm not too sure that I would have called either Stalin or Hitler secularists in the strictest sense, because, you know, the Pope referred to rampant secularism. I think that's a desirable thing in politics, because in politics, you know, secularism just means that you can define a moral system outside of a reference to some religion.
You see, I have no problem with that definition. I have no problem with that. But on the other side, you see people pushing for, I don't have a belief system in any God. You hear people come out, like an article we talked about, that religion is harmful, that separation of church and state must be complete because religion is barbaric. It brings to the table divisions. You see, that's the other side. That's why I'm not arguing with you.
What's barbaric is government.
Yes.
And whenever you combine
you have a balanced approach
anything
here.
with an agency of force, it has to become barbaric.
And that's what
I don't think that's a way of getting around it. No,
yes.
You know, my experience has been that it does not matter whether someone is a believer, a non-believer, what they believe in. It does not define what they are, whether they're a liberal or a conservative or anywhere on the spectrum. You will find people all over the place.
Yes.
And I find it a little ironic, too, that in the context of the Pope's criticism, that the majority of Catholics in this country vote liberal. Which is the party that has most of the values against which that the Pope is complaining about. You know, and I've always found that liberals not only allow abortion, they pay for them through the tax system. You know, and you can take that through every issue, the whole gay marriage issue as well, which I don't think the state should be defining marriage for anybody. But nevertheless, that's the situation you've got, and I think it's a bit of an irony. I don't know whether his message is directed at his own followers or at the rest of Canadians.
It's very interesting, actually, that you would say that, because they did make a reference on another page where it continued, and he talked about his own followers, that you have a lot of his own followers in government, yet they're supporting
that's correct.
The gay marriage issue. So this has created a split, but would the two of you, for instance, disagree with when we have big issues like this, you put it to a referendum. Issues that are really splitting people in a society.
You know what, Christine? I think you made a salient point a while ago that we have to create our own moral codes, or independent from any particular doctrinal perspective, because so probably a referendum is a good idea, so we know where Canadians stand on certain issues. But for me personally, as I looked at this article, I wouldn't want a religion, a denomination, to so influence government in such a manner so that it could...
It becomes a state religion,
that's correct,
in essence.
Because I would want freedom to worship privately according to the dictates of my own conscience. And just suppose I'm going against this very influential church, for example, then I'm going against the grain here. You see what I'm saying? So I would prefer to see it stay open, church and state separated, so that people could worship according to the dictates of their own conscience.
That's fair. Another issue that we see in Canada too is the power of the courts. Sometimes it overrides, or perhaps it has more than you would think, than elected officials. Do you have any opinions here, Robert?
Well, courts and politicians work hand in hand. Certainly the Parliament should be, quote, superior to the court system, because
Yes.
the courts enact the laws that Parliament puts through. But again, often the courts catch the catch-22s in the legislation. There's another piece of legislation that contradicts this, so they have to iron those things out. But I'm concerned a little bit about that suggestion of a referendum, because referendums tend to just cater to majority whim, majority rule, and in a case where a referendum will affect individual rights and actually prevent someone from having rights, that concerns me greatly.
See,
I don't think you should have a referendum.
Rights to me
that
should
can
be in our
eliminate
country a
rights.
non-issue. Nobody should be suffering prejudices and mistreatments and so forth. So once again, I mean, this whole gay marriage debate, it went to, okay, why don't we make it a civil union? Which again could have been investigated. There are many ways to do this. Because if you want it to be outside of religion, then you could also argue, then why is it taking place in a church as a marriage? So let's make it a civil union and make it something of the state if you want to keep it the state.
Right.
So from the point of view of a referendum, I don't think the majority of people in our country would ever disagree with free rights for everybody. Nobody deserves or should be
Right, so
discriminated
you don't want to
against.
have a referendum about taking anybody's rights away. That's
Not
what
rights,
concerns
no.
me. No.
Not rights, no. Wow. We're just getting up here. We're just getting started, and now it's time to leave. Well, the three of you are very nice to have on the panel. It was very insightful.
Thank you.
Thank
It
you
was
so
my pleasure
much.
to be here today.
Yes, thank you so much for joining me. We're going to go for a break now. When we come back, I'm going to be interviewing an author of a book on his strategies for a successful workplace. We'll be back after this. Stay tuned. Six, and 5, thank you so much.
Ground transportation provided by JP Motor Sales, located at 2320 Fairview Street in Burlington.
Well, welcome back to part 2 of our program On the Line. Now we're going to be looking at success in the workplace. Dr. Ross Reck is with me. He is a negotiations expert and he's author of the book called Revved, an incredible way to rev up your workplace and achieve amazing results. Ross, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, believe me.
Now, I'm sure many of our viewers, or perhaps their spouses, are in a situation where their workplace just driving them crazy. You hear a lot of people complaining about this, so I'm going to ask you right off the bat, what specifically was it that interested you in the whole area of organizational behavior? You're big in this area.
Well, the thing that initially interested me, this is the one part of business that's overlooked, and I can't believe business is made up of people.
For sure.
And people get overlooked. Many executives in business all over the world are totally preoccupied with performance numbers, bottom lines and things like that, and yet they forget it's the people who drive the performance numbers.
But drive the bottom line.
So by definition, if you're focused on numbers and bottom lines, you've got to be focused on the driver, and the driver is the people. And that's what this book is all about, is how to focus on that driver.
Do you see a failure of that a lot in our culture?
Yes, I do. And it's not just in North America, it's other parts of the world too. But just looking in North America, there are companies that do this in the book. They focus on their people, and the numbers take care of themselves. Most other companies focus on the numbers and let the people take care of themselves. Somehow, like, focusing on numbers is going to make the numbers better. And they use the numbers as clubs to beat up their people, whereas the highly successful companies focus on the people, meet their needs, and the numbers somehow just take care of themselves.
But somehow, people often don't grasp what you just said. I mean, it's been proven in scientific research.
That's
again
right.
and again, it's been proven.
That's right. People don't grasp it. At the same token, it's also been proven in scientific research. Just came out recently in Harvard Business Review that, for example, I talk in the book about caring and being nice. And they said one of the things, being a likable person that is approachable and listens, it goes hand in hand with being a successful manager. What do people want most in their boss? They want a nice person that listens. That's all they want. They don't want anything else. A nice person that listens. It's pretty simple, that people get so preoccupied with their own needs. And the higher up you go in an organization, the more pressures a manager's under. And they forget to focus on the needs of the people that make them successful.
How do you deal in companies with pressure trickles down? That's one saying. It starts from the top and moves right on down. So the pressure just keeps getting transferred to the one below.
Well, that's right. It does. And in a high-energy workplace, like we talk about how to build in this book, the energy is released to deal with those high-pressure jobs. In a low-energy workplace, high pressure is a disaster. People don't have the energy to deal with it. In a high-energy workplace, they have for example, I talk about one airline that they can turn a plane around 15 minutes. They do it all the time, and that's pressure. But because the workplace is such a positive, high-energy place, it's just a matter of fact, thousands of times a day, and nobody thinks anything of it.
Ross, you talk about the importance of, in your book, managing your emotions. Explain this.
Well, that's right. Well, I just was thinking about that before I came in here. Take, for example, some people are prone to moodiness, and that's especially a disastrous thing if you're a boss, all right? But they don't think about controlling their emotions. They think, okay, I can come in today and be upset and angry, and I expect the rest of the people around me to kowtow to me.
I'm going to stop you for a minute. Is it because they don't realize that other people are being impacted or other people notice this?
They don't notice it because they're so preoccupied with themselves. They're having a problem, so they just transfer that to everybody else, and then it trickles down. And they don't realize they're the big losers when they engage in this behavior. So what you have to do when you come to work, I don't care if you're a boss or a brand new employee, you have to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to have to suck it up, because transferring my bad mood, my angry behavior to other people, all that does is brings everybody down. And now you as the boss are the loser because they're not working up to their potential anymore.
You talk about the attributes of kindness, understanding, listening to people in the workplace. Now, obviously these are very important, and you make that clear to leadership. But if you happen to be a person in a company that you're basically at the bottom of the totem pole and you're feeling like a victim, can you employ these same strategies and make life more bearable for yourself in the office?
Absolutely, and you hit the nail on the head. What the problem is, you feel like a victim, so you start acting like one.
Wow.
Which invites more of that kind of behavior. So one thing you have to remember, when you behave like a victim, you're focusing on your needs, just like we were talking, instead of the needs of the people around you and above you. And people tend to forget that bosses have pressures too. Bosses have feelings too. Bosses feel like victims too. And I remember when I had bosses, I figured this out way back when. So the first thing I always try to do is make my boss look good and make my boss feel good. When someone would come in from an outside organization and said, boy, you guys are really good over here, I would say, well, it wouldn't be for him, it wouldn't be that way. And I had no problem with that boss, okay? So we have to turn it around and stop behaving like a victim and start being proactive. The same token, you can do the things we talked about here about being nice and being interested to the people around you, and all of a sudden your work environment is still pleasant and exciting, and you come to work to get your batteries recharged, as opposed to if you're a victim, it de-energizes the whole thing, okay?
Now, you talk about the principle of not letting things fester. This is a big one for you. But you see, some people don't know how to not let it fester. We're going to go for a break, and I'm going to be questioning you about that after this. Stay tuned.
Thank you. Work at the end of the second.
Just a minute. Yeah, you know what? Thanks, Nick. Yeah, as soon as we come back up, I'm going to mention his name again and the book, and we can just show it up as soon as we get back. Welcome back to our discussion, Workplace Success. With me in the studio is Dr. Russ Reck. He has authored the book called Revved, an incredible way to rev up your workplace and achieve amazing results. Now, your website is very simple, russreck.com. Is that, what about your book? How could it be achieved? Is it only through that website, or is it in all bookstores, major ones?
It's all over the major stores throughout the U.S., Canada, England, and other English-speaking countries, and it's also available on all the through the online retailers like Amazon.ca. So it's out there.
Now, clearing the air, that's a big one, because if there's one thing about human nature is a lot of people, not everybody's like that. Some people like to clear it, but people let it build and build till it's a pressure cooker, and then one day it might just explode. But that can be a very toxic situation. And I'm asking you, what strategies can a person use to clear the air, particularly if it's been built up over a period of time?
Well, it should have been cleared earlier if it was built up over
Yes,
a period of
definitely.
time. But I have this little service called Ross Rex Weekly Reminder. It comes out once a week. And this week's was interesting. You should bring this up. It says the shortest route to forgiveness is an apology. And even if you didn't cause the problem, you can still apologize for the impact that it had on the person or people affected. And the thing about an apology, it's such a powerful behavior, because the minute you start to apologize, within 30 seconds, the person's patting you on the shoulder. It's okay. It's okay. Mm-hmm. But most people just don't have the nerve to take that initial step, and yet I use this word payoff. But what comes back to you is so positive and wonderful. And now that person knows you care about them, or you wouldn't have taken the time. So you win all the way around. All you have to do is take that first little step and say, I'm sorry. And everything takes care of itself from that point forward.
Now, you're talking on behalf of mostly management, because we were talking during the break, and I've read about it too, that it starts with management. The tone of a workplace definitely begins with management and moves on down. But if you're in a workplace and you're feeling like we said, a victim, and you felt that you've been feeling like your boss has been lording it over you and you're feeling helpless, if it's built up in you, the emotions, and you want to clear the air, any strategies that you would suggest here?
Well, I can give you some from firsthand, but confronting a boss is a little bit tricky. But at the same token, if you do it in a positive way, it's going to have a payoff, because most people aren't used to being confronted. And so you have to keep that in mind. It shocks them when it happens. And so I remember one time I was going to get fired from a job. This is when I was working my way through college, construction job. And the superintendent says, so-and-so wants you fired. And I said, why? Well, I think he found out I went to college. And it was something like that. And so I went over and I said, I just heard what happened. And I said, I want to know why. And he told me why. And I said, no, that's not totally true. And I said, you were standing right there when this happened, and blah, blah, blah. And so I stayed on the positive, but I wouldn't let him off the hook. And finally, he looked at me and he says, you still want to work in my crew? And I said, yes. He said, then show up Monday morning. That was the end of it. So as long as you're honest and you're not venting your frustrations, you're just dealing with the facts. Obviously, you don't think much of me, or it seems that way to me. People aren't used to hearing that, and now they have to give you an answer. And that usually works into something positive. Like I said, I got my job back, and it was a very important job at the time.
Wow, very interesting.
Yeah.
Something else you talk about in your book, and it's very fundamental and very hopeful. You say the roughest road leads to the top. People do not like the rough road.
No, they don't. But the roughest roads where all the learning takes place. And my father always used to tell me, he says, talk to any self-made multimillionaire, and you're going to find out they've been bankrupt 2 or 3 times, or 4 even. Why? They learn a lot each time they go bankrupt, and when they come back, they don't repeat the same mistakes. And then pretty soon, they don't go bankrupt anymore. They just keep going up because they made the mistakes. So life is all about making mistakes, and my next book's going to be on that. The whole idea behind failure. Failure means you learn something. Now you won't, if you don't make that same mistake again, it's never going to happen again. But people are so afraid to take that chance, and there's no chance. You're the only one that wins when you take a chance.
Take a chance. That's important, because the classic complaint you hear about, I'm talking the worker that sees his or herself as a victim, is I go to work every day, I get abused by my boss, I'm mistreated, disrespected, put to work all hours, not even cared about. And basically I'm only in this job because I can't find anything else, and I have to put a meal on the table. Is there anything to be learned from somebody in that position?
Well, you can take it easy, right, and get another job, but that's obviously not an option. But again, that goes back to playing the victim. And chances are that person who talks like that is surrounded by people who reinforce this in each other. They're all taking the victim approach. And so what the first step to do is to come to work and start working on your peers. And I mentioned in the book about being nice and how it has such a profound impact on people.
Well, you call it a multiplier effect as well.
Well, what being nice does is it releases the reservoir of positive energy that's inside of all of us. All of us walk around this reservoir of positive energy just dying to be released. And so all you have to do is be nice to somebody, and it releases this energy, which puts a smile on their face and makes them excited. Now what happens is that person feels really good. They start being nice to the people around them, and pretty soon you got the whole place buzzing, regardless of the boss, with positive energy, all because one person came to work that day and decided to be nice.
Now, people sometimes do the reverse. They get angry in the workplace, they see something happening, and they vent.
That's right, they vent. And what we have to do is, again, taking a positive impact side of it. I remember when I was in Vietnam in the Army, some guy came in complaining about being overworked, and one of my buddies said to him, "What's it like to be the only person that works around here?" That did it. That was the end of the discussion. We all have it. And so if you have positive energy being generated constantly, you have the energy left over to deal with this kind of thing. If it's a negative energy workplace, then it's intolerable because you have nothing left over to deal with. Now the loser in that is management, because they only are tapping into maybe a third of the person that came to work, and the other 2/3 of what they could possibly be contributing to make that manager look good is being lost.
Now this sounds like everything you're saying here. It sounds like a choice to take on a whole change in mindset. And this is something I want to talk to you about. We're going to go for a break first. We'll be back after this. Stay tuned. Hello again and welcome back to our discussion. We're talking about positive change in the workplace, how to succeed in the workplace. With me in the studio is Dr. Ross Reck. He's authored the book called Revved. And once again, Ross, viewers can get this book at major bookstores.
Major bookstores.
On your website.
Online retailers.
rossreck.com.
Yeah, there's just so many .coms out there selling books. So if you go to the website, if you go to the book's website called revvedbook.com, R-E-V-V-E-D book.com, it's at McGraw-Hill. They will list all the online retailers, and if you have a favorite, you can go to it.
Yes. Now, Ross, before the break, we were talking about a whole change in mindset, being able to accomplish this. So your workplace is just driving you crazy. How do you even make that choice? I mean, it becomes a choice, and this is an area I want you to emphasize, because if you look at even human behavior, people are generally very resistant to change. They go the road that's the easiest. So if you form a habit, you tend to stick to it.
That's true, and actually what they're doing when they're playing victims and when they're accepting things the way they are, they're actually going the road that's the hardest, because they're going to work every day, and the work is like a toxic waste dump. They just don't like being there. So if you can turn it around and get the positive things going, as I mentioned, it releases reservoirs of positive energy. And if you ever heard the expression, excitement is contagious, that's why, because it's this constant energy being released. At least you're going to have fun when you get there with your friends. And it's a lot more, you know, instead of, I have to go to work today, oh me, oh my, oh, I get to go to work, I can't wait. That's what we're trying to turn work in. So work becomes a place where you get your batteries recharged. And that's when work is fun to go to. And there are companies around the world, lots of them, that tap into that source of energy every single day.
Just listening to you here, does it come down to a decision to focus? I mean, you're looking at it, you're coming to work and you get to socialize with your friends. Many people do enjoy this in the workplace, but sometimes it's taken for granted. They may only see the negatives and not look at those positives. How far will this take you, that whole change in attitude?
Quite a long ways, because like I said, it's contagious. People can't just not respond to something positive. They cannot just not respond to kindness. And so even if you got the biggest crab that's been that way for years, start working on them. I always made this a game. I picked the crabbiest person I could find and I'd start working on him.
So you did this on purpose?
Yeah. And I remember one guy, he was, when I was running heavy equipment, he was a union guy and he did not like my program and wouldn't even talk to me. And every time I went to ask him for some help, he'd tell me to take a hike, but more graphically he would tell me. And I just worked on that guy, and I worked on that guy, and about 6 weeks later, I was walking one end of the job site to the other, and here comes this big loader, and this guy was driving, a real cantankerous guy. I thought, maybe he's going to try to run me over because nobody was around. And he stopped.
Not that bad, eh?
He stopped next to me, and he went like this. And I climbed up into this loader, and he poured me a glass of lemonade out of his thermos jug. I thought it was a little too hot today to be walking, so I thought I'd give you a ride. You never know, but all that kindness, you never know when it's going to finally break through, but it breaks through immediately. They just don't show you.
Did it ever stress you out in the process?
You get a little frustrated, but you can see signs that you're getting to them. And it's a fun game to play because the big winner is you and them, because when it's all finished, you got another friend. And at the same token, you're not being dragged down in this toxic work environment. You're above all this stuff. And so your energy stays the way you want it to.
Now, Ross, you do a lot of speaking to management as well. And that's a positive thing, because if there's one thing that most people would agree with, it's very profitable to address this with management in various companies.
But it's a hard sell to somebody who hasn't done this before, because they don't want to break. They don't want to. Well, they're so afraid that bad things are going to happen. And problem is, you can give them 1,000 examples where it's working. I mean, these are headline companies, and they'll say, "Are you sure?" Well, yeah, I'm sure. I wouldn't be sitting here to tell you if I wasn't sure. And that's why it's, for me, the most fun companies for me to consult at are the ones that are desperate, because they've tried everything else and it won't work. And so when I come in with this new thing, hey, let's give it a shot. Oh yeah, and that's a wonderful thing to do.
Well, Ross, you just keep that effort going. It's great. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine.
Well, on tomorrow's program, on the second half of our show, the in-depth interview, we're going to be dealing with an Ontario bill in third reading now, and it's purporting a way to keep your kids in school. We're going to be debating that bill. And of course, you're going to be here to hear what our Viewpoints panel has to say. I'm Christine Williams, and from all of us, thank you for watching.